Hello everyone, this is the Game Philosopher, and today we're talking about the topics. So, I've talked about topics before in the past in this channel, but this time I'm doing it again because the How to Argue series kind of needs some backup with topics. In fact, you can't really talk about how to argue if you don't have topics. In fact, when we have a thesis, antithesis, synthesis, it's all because we have a question, and questions are very important towards topics to discover what the topic is. Now, when you're looking for a topic, also we got to think about this in the sense of to what an argument and dialectic itself is useful in logic. But first, let me give a little pointer. When you're looking for a topic, you could be anywhere. You could be at a bar, and your friend asks you, "Should we drink too much? Should we drink a lot, or should we be more moderate?" You have two possible topics: drunkenness, moderation, and arguably more because you could also take a stance on sobriety as well. But that's neither here nor there because we're not talking about drunkenness. We're talking about topics. And so I would have to say when you're looking for your topics, let the question itself dominate what's happening. Let the context itself dominate what's happening. If you don't have a question, make up a question. And when you make up a question, you can get a nice little conversation going. In fact, the person who questions is the one who dominates the topic itself by nature of asking the question, causing this little problem, this little conflict that emerges between this idea and that idea. And the idea of the dialectic is to try to resolve it through talking about it and reducing down to theory of some sort from the reasoning that's going on about things like should we drink a lot? Should we practice moderation? How should we practice moderation? Now, in my former video on topics a while back, I talked about this as the thesis, the hypothesis from looking at Boetius. Now, Aristotle himself, he will go later into how to be an effective questioner. He doesn't really seem to do as much in the topics treatise, um, so far as what I'm talking about, but that's still, I'm going to push that off to later because there's going to be a lot more stuff on questions later in the series. But for this video, we're going to focus on to what extent reasoning is useful. So I talked about a casual type thing where you're out with your friends and a question is put to you. This could even apply to politics. Someone asks you, what's your opinion on war, on this war, or even war in general? What's your opinion on economics? Are you a socialist, capitalist? Well, if you are not a dialectician, you might say, I'm a socialist or I'm a capitalist. Now, if you're a dialectician, you will be able to give more argument. You might be able to flesh it out and say a more precise opinion and not say vaguely, I'm a socialist, I'm a capitalist, or whatever it may be. Uh, to a certain extent, also, when you're looking at the dialectic and topics, um, of course, later in this series, well, I'm having this little miniature series on topics because it's such a wide variety of information in the topics itself, including argument tactics. But when you're looking at the topics from a rational standpoint, a lot of people seem to fear disagreement. But this is not really necessarily the case because I think a lot of times people say vaguely, I'm this, I am that. I'm not going to give you so much because I uh, have not thought it through, or I don't want my thoughts questioned. I don't want my words to do anything more than tell you what you want to know and not so much give you the details. Well, the big problem with this is a lot of times when people question, And this is especially true in this day and age with a lot of the mentality of people. But people think language is a way of dominating over others, but it's really not. It's about clarity. And of course, when someone asks you, what do you think justice is? Or what do you think about some candidates? You might be able to answer this much better if you were to take a more dialectical approach of reasoning as opposed to, well, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. I will not vote for this guy because I don't like him. He's a, give some sort of insult right there. And a lot of times, you can't really build bridges this way either because you're not focused on what is reasonable. Now, if you were to focus on the ideas and argue, and of course, I have this little three sentence rules for conciseness based off loosely the syllogism, where you can't go beyond three sentences as a general rule. Now, you might have to later, or according to circumstance, break the rule, but three sentences is a pretty good general guide to conciseness. And talking about topics, when we have these topics, a general rule is to focus only on the question itself and giving a good answer. If you're going to be like giving a lazy answer and say, um, I'm a socialist, or I'm a capitalist, what happens is you're not really doing anyone a favor. For one, what is a socialist? What is a capitalist in your perspective? Or, I don't like this guy because he's a, let's see, oligarch, or he's a tyrant. Well, what's a tyrant? What makes this guy a tyrant? What makes him an oligarch? There are so many questions you leave unanswered when you're not looking at the topic and trying to answer based off of the topic with reasoning to show understanding, to get the principle out of things. I do not like. I'm going to try to avoid modern American politicians by the way, since it's so polarized. But I do not like Theodore Roosevelt because of I think he's an imperialist. So what? What makes him an imperialist? What happened? So I do not like Theodore Roosevelt because he seemed to have extended America too much, and he was a little too bold, and he could have messed up big time by causing an issue with the economy through this expansion. Well, yes, this answer right here is much better than I do not like him because he's an imperialist. Because you're actually giving a concrete reasoning. You're actually hitting the ball home. Now, not everyone will agree with you. In fact, that's fine. People will examine things and you get deeper, deeper, deeper. And a lot of times when you do this and you're doing it from a standpoint of reason, it's not going to be so negative in context. It's not going to be mean. You're not trying to humiliate your conversation partner. Instead, you're trying to talk with them, and a lot of times you actually free up your mind for some jokes that can be done. Everyone can have fun within this idea of talking about the topics. Now, reasoning can also be useful in a business. For example, if your boss asks you, what do you think is better to sell? You might be able to give some concise reasonings, which of course can go into salesmanship because if you have these concise reasonings of why this product is so good, you can actually sell this product to someone else, and that itself can give you an edge. Now, more of that can be talked about if I ever get into rhetoric again, which I will in the future, just not in the series. So, essentially speaking, if you have all these reasonings, you have the questions that dominate everything, and you're not content to just insult, what you will find is there's a lot more happiness you can have. You can have a better conversation going on. and people are more free because a lot of times people get brash because they actually do not know, so they kind of get aggressive. Now online, by the way, a lot of this, the rules of this can change because a lot of times people might misinterpret something said online because someone might sound much more mean online than they would if they were to speak out what is being said. So you have to be still very careful. And arguably speaking, focusing on the logic and the question and giving actual uh, reasonings as opposed to saying, "Well, I'm a capitalist. Oh, I don't like this guy because he's an imperialist." This itself can actually cause a more friendly and happier dialogue. Also, you have to remember that not everyone is trained in logic and dialectics, so a lot of times, if something happens and it goes wrong, a lot of times it's not your fault if you follow these simple things. A lot of times it's your opponent's fault, but at the same time, you don't have to worry too much about that. In fact, they're punishing themselves by making themselves look kind of brutish. Meanwhile, you're being rational and you're fighting against the irrational impulses, and you're being able to ask pointed questions towards uh, better discussion. You might find these topics. You might be able to talk with anyone about anything and pretty much increase the learning in everyone. And this is a good thing. Now, topics itself, I know I didn't cover it in the detail, which probably everyone would want, but this topics video is about reasoning and why it is useful. So, like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned. I'm actually later this week going to do more on topics. In fact, I have planned for the next video the tactics of arguments from the topics treatise. Thanks for watching. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, be philosophical, and remember to engage in dialect or dialectics. Engage in dialectics and enjoy your fun that you get from it. Let me know in the comments if you have a story of a very nice little conversation that you have had or that you will have after watching this video where you looked for the topic, you let the topic dominate and be dominated by the questioning, and essentially had a pretty good conversation going on based off of what ideas there are, not so much saying some sort of very vague label. Thanks for watching.